Hello everyone, welcome back to another week of the Unstoppable Dad Project. Thanks again for joining us. Back to it for another week. So before we get into it, a couple of little bits of housekeeping. Firstly, if you are not subscribed on the podcast channels, Spotify, Apple, Google, and all those other platforms, make sure you jump on and subscribe to the podcast on there. You will be notified as soon as I drop an episode. So that is the first place that I publish the episodes. I can plan to continue to just put the audio version of it up before I upload the video version of it. So if you want to be the first to listen to these episodes, please make sure you have subscribed on there. Plus, that helps us get this out to more people. So make sure you are sharing it around with anybody who you think might find some value from what it is that I am doing here. The other thing is too, we have a free Facebook group for dads, so there is links to that in the show notes, and follow us on the socials, so Facebook, Instagram, again, all those links are in the show notes. If you are listening to this on Spotify or Apple, if you are watching the video version of it, you will be able to find them on YouTube or on Facebook. So, today, I want to have a talk about you can't do everything, and you just simply cannot do everything that maybe you want to do or you need to do. So last week I kind of spoke about why I'd been MIA for a few weeks, so for a few months I should say, and just that feeling of having to go through a major life transition where I was changing my internal identity. And one of the things that I kind of realized over that time, and I've known this for quite a while, and it's something that I know a lot of dads, a lot of parents go through, and it's that feeling like we need to do everything, like we're constantly are doing everything, and there's not enough time to do things for ourselves, or there's not enough time to do maybe everything that we want to do, or everything that we think we should do. And when we're not doing things that we feel like we should do, or we think that we should do, that it can lead to this massive feeling of guilt around not getting done what we need to. And that guilt can filter into all aspects of our life, even if it's just one area of our life where maybe we're not doing something that we feel we need to, or that we're being told by somebody else that we need to. That feeling of guilt around that particular area can filter into everything else, and it can leave us feeling this sense of anxiety, this sense of even depression, and this sense of just, I'm not good enough. I'm not getting to do what I need to do. And there is just a point where you need to draw a line in the sand and understand that you just simply can't do everything. You're going to need to say no to certain things. There are going to be weeks where you are not going to get time to do something that maybe you want to or you feel you need to do. And some of the things that I've done to try and help me work through those feelings of guilt and frustration and anxiety around not getting time to do it is firstly understanding what's important to me. Now, when I say this is not something that you have heard from somebody else should be your hierarchy of importance or should be your priorities. This is for you. And I think in order to actually work that out, it takes some time. It's not something that you can just sit down for 20 minutes with a pad and paper. Now, I do actually think that by sitting down with a pad, paper, and pen and writing out what you feel is important to you, I think that's a good exercise to do. But I think that it is something that constantly needs to evolve and constantly needs to be fluid. It's not something that needs to be rigid, because as I've spoken about on previous episodes, circumstances are always going to change. There is always going to be something that is going to come up, whether it be for a day or a week or a month, where we are going to need to shift our priorities and shift the time requirements that need to go into each of those priorities in order for us to adequately serve the most pending thing at that time. So, yes, sitting down, writing it out, and potentially getting some ideas from other people, but this type of stuff, in order to, and this is only what I know has worked for myself, right? Like, this may not work for everybody, but some of the people that I've spoken to going through this process definitely helps, right? And it definitely clarifies some things and gives a little bit more certainty around the action we need to take. But sitting down to begin with and starting to write out, right, what's most important to me? For a lot of us, like, family's going to be at the top of the list, right? Because we want to provide a better life for our kids. We want to be a loving husband or wife, if there's any women listening to this. We want to be, the best version of ourselves, and we want to be a servant to the people that are most important to us, and we want to provide them with the life that they want. Now, there is an element where you need to look after yourself, and I'll get that into that in a minute, but working through that, family's probably going to top the list. Now, in order to provide for the family, there's probably going to be a professional element that needs to be on the list too. And then there's going to be some element of yourself, whether that be health, fitness, whatever the case might be. And there's going to be other priorities outside of that. But for most people, like, those three are going to top the list. Again, this is not set in stone. Do not use what I am saying. Work it out for yourself, because only by working it out for yourself will you truly understand and be truly able to make the right decisions for you. But understanding what is important for you and the order of hierarchy and how that works in for you. Now, this is always going to change. The kids get sick. It means that the time that's going to go into the family element of it is going to be there, and that's going to have to come from somewhere else. But once you kind of understand those priorities for you then and understand that this is going to be fluid, it's not going to be rigid, then you can start to have a look at what time needs to be allocated to each priority. Now, I'm not a big believer in allocating family time. I have been in the past, but I think that needs to be probably one thing where you do leave it a little bit open-ended. Now, this is going to be dependent on the individual, because if you are a super busy professional, then you may need to allocate that time in your diary. If you're somebody who's got a little bit more flexibility in their schedule, then you may not have to. Again, this is so individual, but this is just some framework and some processes which hopefully may help you alleviate that feeling of overwhelm that can come with feeling like you're doing everything. But once you kind of understand how much time needs to be put into those priorities, then you can start to plan out the time for the things that do need rigidity within the schedule. So that may be things like working out, it may be things like preparing your meals, it may be work, like particular work tasks may need to go in there. If you're working for somebody, your schedule's kind of set out. If you're working for yourself, obviously allocating different times to the elements of your business is going to be important too, because the biggest thing for a lot of people when it feels like we are running out of time to do the things that we either want to do or we feel we need to do is a task will always expand into the time that we give it. So let's relate back to something that I'm super familiar with, right? Working out. If you've got, the structure and the format of a session that I would do for my clients, we're usually looking at 4 to 6 movements, most of them supersetted, because a lot of people that I'm working with are time poor. And from there, if I was to say, hey, just go ahead and do this session, or you were to do this session, there are going to be people that may take 90 minutes to do the session. There are going to be people that can take 45 minutes to do the session. Now, for the most part, most people, if they actually knuckle in and get it done, will get that session done within 40 minutes to maximum an hour. Absolute maximum. But for the most part, you're looking at that 40 to 45 minute mark. That includes warm-up, that includes your 4 to 6 movements, and that includes a little bit of a cool down at the end of the session, right? So all that done in 45 minutes. Now, if you don't allocate that time to it, if you don't go, right, I'm giving myself 45 minutes, I'm walking out of the gym within an hour of I walk in there. If you are the type of person that just sits there, scrolls through your phone, has a look at Instagram and Facebook, that time's going to go from 45 minutes to do that session to 90 minutes to do that session. Now, all of a sudden, when it then takes 90 minutes to get that session done, you then start to feel like, I don't have time to do this. Because if you're doing that even just 3 times a week, right, that extra 30 minutes on top of what you really only need to allocate to do that particular task then turns into 90 minutes a week that you're losing. And that's potentially 90 minutes a week less that you get with family, that you get at work, or you get with a priority that may be higher on your list than that particular task. So once you have worked out and once you understand what the priorities are for you at that particular point in your life, and then you start to understand, how much time do I really need to put into this, right? Then, once you start planning out the time, you can be more efficient with the time that you're putting into each of those individual tasks. And by doing that, you're going to find that you're not bleeding extra time outside of that, which is detracting from potentially things that either you want to get started on or you want to allocate more time on. And by doing that, you start to alleviate some of those feelings of guilt, some of those feelings that are associated with not getting done what you want to get done. And sometimes the other part to this is, once you really understand what's important to you and you really understand your priorities, it means that you may have to say no to some things. But by understanding what is important to you, it's going to give you the power to say no to the things that you may actually not have time to do. So understanding your values and your priorities is probably the most important part for a lot of parents to think about exactly where they want to put their energy and they want to put their time. And I say energy, even though I haven't mentioned it, because it does take energy to go and work out. It does take energy to go and go to work. And we not only have to worry about the time component, but we have to worry about the energy that it is taking out of us. Because if it is taking too much energy out of us to do a particular thing, and that's detracting from higher priorities on our list, maybe it's that we're not able to spend as much quality time, or the time we're spending with like our kids and our significant others is not of a level that we're satisfied with, because something else that we're putting time in is draining that energy, so we don't have that left over. So, and that's potentially another conversation, but that's also something to bear in mind once you get down this track. So make sure that when you are going through this is what's important to you. Everyone's going to have different priorities on their list, depending on their own particular set of values, their upbringing, and what's important to them right now. Those values are going to be fluid. They are going to change. And the biggest change for a lot of us is when we have kids. Obviously, one of the things that shifts to probably the highest point on that priority list is the kids. And it's something that we've never had to have on that list until we have those kids. So that's going to impact other things in our life. And understanding that can sometimes take away from that, especially for dads. I listened to a podcast the other day. I can't remember who was talking. And they're like, when you have a kid, like, get ready for the dad guilt. Because you're going to feel a little bit useless in those first 6 months. And you do, because you really can't contribute a whole lot to the upbringing of the kid. But then when they start to move and they start to process the environment, then you start to become a more integral part of what they're doing. Now, that doesn't mean when it's still not an important support structure, but that feeling, when you're in that position, you can feel like you're not doing enough. You can feel like you need to do more. I digress, back to where we were. But understanding those values, and especially when you are new in it, and realizing that, hey, look, this is something that is now on probably the highest thing on my priority list, that has never been on there before. And there's a big time component to that, and that's going to affect the other things that I do. Then I can start to plan out a hierarchy of how I'm going to make decisions based on what's important to me and what's important to my values. And by doing that and understanding that that's going to change from time to time as kids get older and they're going to go to school, maybe you're not going to be able to spend as much time with them. So that time can be put into something else. And understanding that's fluid and that's going to change. And then understanding when there are things that maybe you're trying to start doing and fit in, how much time am I going to need to allocate to that? And it doesn't have to be, for some of us, it might be the bare minimum amount of time we can allocate to it. And then finding a plan that's going to fit into that structure. For others, you may have the time. It may just be about shifting some other priorities in order to create that time, but understanding how much time needs to be allocated to some of the tasks. Some of the tasks may be a little bit open-ended. Some of the priorities need to be a little bit more stringent, and then from there, planning that time so that when you do that particular task, it doesn't bleed into other things and take away the time from the other things that you feel are more important than that particular priority. But this is something that I don't believe you can just sit down for 30 minutes and work out. I think to begin with, if you are really struggling with this, I think sitting down with a pad and a pen and writing out what you feel is important to you right now is a good starting point. But understanding that that is not going to be your end point either. That is going to need to shift and change and evolve based off different circumstances and different times in your life. And then from there, starting out that planning process of allocating time to things that maybe you're not doing now that you want to do. And then the part B of that is maybe if there is no time and it is really low down on the priority list, maybe it's something you've just got to say no to. And that's kind of understanding, trying to remove some of that guilt and that anxiety around potentially not having enough time for us to do the things that maybe we feel we need to. That's the process that I've gone through that has really helped me, and I've helped a few other people through that process as well. So if you're kind of in that position and you'd like some help, reach out. There is a link in the show notes where you can book in a time to have a chat with me if you need to. We also have a new 12-week program that we're going to be launching in the next few weeks, so keep an eye on the socials, whether it be my socials or it be the Unstoppable Dad Project socials. But if you're keen on getting on board with that, book in a time. Let's have a chat and see if it's going to be a good fit for you. So that is it for this week. Hope you got some value out of that. A little bit of a rant, a ramble on you can't go and do everything. So it's about working out what's important for you, for your values, and for the time that you actually have in life. Take care. We'll see you next week. Bye.